Did Jesus teach us to prepare for digital currency? You're probably thinking, come on, Nelson. He did no such thing. We still don't have digital currency, and he certainly didn't teach about it in the first century. Okay, I can understand your hesitancy, but that's because traditional churches have a low view of how all-encompassing Jesus' end-time teachings were. As you're going to find out today, Jesus had a lot to say about this subject, and although it's never taught that way, this teaching was given in an end-time context, and it's so applicable, as you're about to find out. Now, to be honest, are you worried about the coming economic collapse and the coming of digital currency? I bet 95% of you are. Jesus had this to say to you and to me and to all of us about this subject. Do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give to the poor. Luke 12, 32 and 33. See, that solves it all right there, doesn't it? Don't worry, just give everything you have away. What? You're probably thinking, that doesn't help at all. Well, maybe it's time to settle back and check out the rest of his teaching. Wear your skeptical glasses if you want, but also open your thinking to the possibility that if economic collapse is part of the end times, then Jesus would have prepared his people for it, right? Doesn't that make sense? Jesus is God, so his teachings can be quite applicable to both first century issues and to end time issues at the same time. Jesus was not limited like we might be. Now, this teaching comes out of Luke 12, and immediately after his economic suggestions, Jesus said this, "Be prepared and keep your lamps lit. You are also to be like people who are waiting for their master when he returns from the wedding feast, so that they may immediately open the door for him when he comes and knocks." Luke 12, 35 through 36. I mention this at this point in the teachings so that we're all clear that this teaching was given in an end-time context. Virgins, keeping our lamps lit for the bridegroom, is what we're asked to be about in the end times, after all. Now, Luke records at the beginning of this account that Jesus was in a season where he had been persecuted by the Pharisees, who were hostile to him and trying to trap him. On this particular day, based on what had been going on, all that persecution stuff, Jesus was teaching the disciples how they should react to persecution. Now, when they bring you before synagogues and officials and authorities, do not worry about how or what you're to speak in your defense or what you're to say. For the Holy Spirit will teach you in that very hour what you ought to say. Luke 12, 11 through 12. This is the same teaching Jesus would later give them in both Mark and Luke's versions of the Olivet Discourse. It's end-time teaching as well as first-century teaching. But it was in this very context, this very serious context, that someone in the crowd cried out about money. Totally inappropriately, it seemed. Now, someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." Luke 12:13. Think about how totally wrong this was. Jesus was having the most serious conversation with his disciples about persecution, maybe one of the most serious conversations he'd had up to that point in their ministry. And someone yells out for Jesus to help him get more money in the inheritance. Jesus, who was God and who knew the past, present, and future, knew that his followers in the end times would be tempted, just like this man, to not see the seriousness of the moment and to be focused on money instead. Does this mean our focus on digital currency is us being like this man? Yeah, maybe. Was this first century man being ripped off by his brother and thus was seeking financial justice? I think maybe he was. Are we about to get ripped off by the central bankers of this world as they convert our liquid, physical cash and all our assets into digital accounts that they can control, where we will own nothing and they will be happy, as the World Economic Forum tells us over and over. Yes, that's likely too. So we are just like that man, getting ripped off and looking to Jesus for justice. And rather than provide that justice for the man, Jesus told a parable to help him and us see the proper place that money should have in our lives. The parable of the bigger barns. The man in the parable had a highly productive crop, sort of like you and I have probably done pretty well living in the United States, being pretty well off. Based on that crop, the man figured he could retire if he just built bigger barns to store the crop and could live off that for many years, kind of like our retirements. God came to him that night and said, "You fool, this very night your soul is demanded of you. And as for all that you have prepared, who will own it now? Such is the one who stores up treasure for himself and is not rich in relation to God." Luke 12:20-21. So the man valued money for his own desires, and that is not God's plan. Now, that is not what most of our viewers want to hear at this point. We've been trained by the world system to desire bigger bank accounts, bigger cars, bigger houses, bigger vacations, bigger barns. But Jesus knows these things are about to be taken away from us suddenly, just as they were for the man in the parable. And if we are about to enter the tribulation, they will be taken away sooner maybe than we expect. However, hang in there. Jesus actually has a solution that works, a shocking solution. So keep watching. This is the solution I have never heard taught from a single pulpit in my life. Jesus followed the parable up with this statement for his disciples. "And do not seek what you are to eat and what you are to drink, and do not keep worrying. For all these things are what the nations of the world eagerly seek, and your Father knows that you need these things. But seek his kingdom, and these things will be provided to you." This is the part that Western Christians in North America, Europe, and Australia do not want to hear. We've been trained by the system to want more for ourselves than just the necessities of life, which is what Jesus was promising. Instead, we want cars, vacations, houses, etc. But that isn't what Jesus was promising. Then he drops the bomb on how that provision will happen. And it's probably not at all what you expect. Do not be afraid, little flock, because your Father has chosen to give you the kingdom. And by that, he's kind of saying, instead of all those things you're looking for, he's giving you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give to charity. Make yourselves money belts that do not wear out. Luke 12:32-33. This is the part that none of our viewers really wanted to hear about. How is giving to the poor a way that God will provide for you when the globalists take away your possessions? And it kind of sounded like treasures in heaven, didn't it? From the Matthew account of this, when Jesus was talking on the Sermon on the Mount. He said, moth and rust can't destroy there. It's kind of like the money belts that don't wear out. But you're probably thinking, maybe it's going to provide for the poor, but not for me, right? However, maybe it's a way to provide for both, you and them. Let me explain. When you help someone else, it helps you build a relationship with that person, so that in the future, when you need help, maybe they'll be more willing to help you. Notice what Jesus said very carefully. Do not be afraid, because the Father has chosen to give you the kingdom. He didn't give you all this other stuff. He's giving you the kingdom. So who is the kingdom? All of those around you. All of those who follow the Nelson Walters channel. Later in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus told another parable about this exact same concept. The parable of the shrewd manager. In Luke 16, in that parable, the business owner found out that his manager was cheating him. So he decided to fire the manager. Probably what you would do. The dishonest manager then discounted the amount owed by the owner's clients so that after he was fired, these very same clients that he discounted the amount they owed would help him out. Jesus summarized this teaching like this. And I say to you, make friends for yourselves by means of the wealth of unrighteousness, so that when it's all gone, and that's what's going to happen when the globalists take everything away, they will receive you into eternal dwellings. Luke 16:9. This is the exact same idea as Luke 12. Help others while you still have the means, so that when it's gone, those you helped will help you back through prayer, personal service, or maybe even monetarily if they have something left. God has given us the people of the kingdom as a means of support. Let me say that again. It's very important. God has given us the people of the kingdom as our means of support, not just our jobs or our savings accounts. We help them, and in turn, they will likely help us. And make no mistake about it, our wealth will be taken away from us sooner than you think. We are going to need each other in a very real way. And this is one of the reasons why you follow this channel. And if you're liking this video, or at least realizing that it's good sound advice, even if you don't like what it's saying, like, and if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe, because that's how this gets pushed out to a wider audience. An audience who might be there to not only have us help them, but help us in the future. Now, if you haven't figured it out yet, this is the exact opposite approach of how benevolence is done in most churches today. There, we give to the church, and it gives to the poor and needy. The interpersonal dimension of one person helping another is completely lost. The community building that occurs through the giving of assistance is completely lost. So, is it any wonder that these passages are not taught or taught correctly from most pulpits or most ministries? It would dramatically reduce giving to the ministry, wouldn't it? They might argue that their 501(c) status as that type of organization, a nonprofit organization, it's better for them to give to the poor than for you to do it. You would save more money doing it that way by not paying taxes, and that is true. But what do you lose? Now, this doesn't mean some giving can't be done through the churches, especially giving outside of the community, like giving to Israel at this time of their great need. I mean, it's very hard for you to do that directly rather than give, to a ministry. But for the most part, it isn't the way Jesus outlined for us to give in the Gospels. And look at how Jesus concluded this session. No servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and Mammon. Luke 16:13. God equates the love of money with the ancient Syrian god of wealth, Mammon. Love of money, Jesus is saying, is love and worship of demons. And God said, you love them or you love him. It's no halfway. So ask yourself, do you really trust him or do you trust them? Okay, so let's apply this teaching to the very real situation that we're all going to be facing probably in the near future, if not within the next 6 to 12 months. Digital currency and digital tokens to show ownership of everything from cars to houses to computers to phones, and then the eventual taking away of that ownership so you will own nothing and they will be happy. When that happens, we're going to have to depend on each other. To highlight this end-time application, Jesus followed up this teaching in Luke 12 with the parable of the wise and wicked servants. It's the same one found in Matthew 24 in the Olivet Discourse. It's an obvious end-time application. Look how Luke's version goes. And the Lord said, "Who then is the faithful and sensible steward, whom his master will put in charge of his servants to give them their rations," meaning food rations, "at the proper time?" See, it's providing for others at the appointed time. Blessed is that slave whom his master finds so doing when he comes. Truly I say to you that he will put him in charge of all of his possessions. So providing for others in the end times is God's plan and expectation for us, and not doing so is going to result in being assigned a place with the hypocrites or unbelievers. In other words, those who will be left behind on the day of the Lord and not raptured into heaven. And it has a very practical purpose as well, as we just discussed. All of us helping each other in the times that are coming. So how do you do that? Lots of ways. Get together with your friends, form a house church. Begin serving your community together. Consider liquidating some of your savings into food to give away when the hard times hit. Be overly generous when you hear of others needing help. And in God's economy, it doesn't matter if you have $1 and give away 10 cents, or you have $1 million and give away $100,000. To God, He sees them all the same. Remember the widow's mite account. So every dollar you give away promotes the kingdom, and it is one less dollar the globalists get to take away from you. I love that part. And we still have time to put things away. Joseph warned Egypt that they had 7 years of plenty before the 7 years of famine that would follow. And I think similar things are happening. So click right here to discover if God has graced us with 7 years of plenty, and that would be the time we're in now, before the 7-year tribulation, which we think is coming soon. Till then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there.